Here's a sizable reef tank. Looks like 200-ish gallons, it's my guess. Got nice tanks. Oh, to the lights. Looks like Hydro 26s, 3 of those run across the top. Running this tank open top. So let me pause right there for a minute. Even though, from what I can tell from the fish that I've seen so far, we don't have any fish that are very likely jumpers, such as wrasses and blennies and things like that, I would still put some kind of covering over the top of the tank, just in case. Especially with some of the nice tangs that he has. Not that they're prone, but if you find a sizable fish, really any fish, but especially a nice sizable tang crispy on the ground, you're going to be upset. So cover it in some way. Personally, I like canopies. Nothing else but that egg crate type of material. Just give yourself that safety factor. Looks like we've got a gyre on each end for some flow, as well as some corellias to mix it up. So since you have the gyre and you have these corellias, what I would do is I would put those corellias on the back to push some flow from the back to the front. Now you got to be careful with this. Since those pumps aren't controllable, then if they're too much of flow, if they're too high of a flow of a pump, then you're just going to move your sand bed. So I would take your lower flow ones, put them on the back, leave the gyres on either end to blow water across the length of this tank. Nice Naso tang there. Lemon peel angel. I'm curious if that lemon peel is leaving everything alone. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hang on. Back up. I think I saw it. I can't. Yep. Right there. Domino Damsel. That is one mean damsel right there. He might even have 2 of them, but hey, I can be wrong. If they're good citizens, leave them be. Yep, 2 of them. Yeesh. I hope they're not beating everything up. Nice bubble tip, maybe even a long tentacle down there in the corner. That looks nice. I'm curious if that is a long tentacle and how that's doing for you, how long you've had it. Got a nice variety of rock work on this tank as well. Looks like he's got a fair amount of branching pieces, maybe some old skeletons that he's built in more of a vertical plane. So it makes for a little different aquascape than what you usually see. That's a nice touch. Maroon Clown and what looks to be a very nice rainbow bubble tip. Those maroons can get quite aggressive. This is like the semi-aggressive reef tank here. We've got Domino Damsels, and then we've got some Maroon Clowns. But again, if everyone's getting along, so be it. Just watch your hand when you put it in the tank. Got a mix of softies, some hard corals in here as well, big Monty cap. It's got some bubble coral there in the back. Looks like he's got a head that's not doing well. Bubble corals can be a little bit finicky. I love them. I sometimes have a hard time with them because I can't get them locally, so I have to ship them in. A lot of times they struggle with shipping. So with that head struggling, and it looks like this coral's been there for a while, I would actually try to move this out into a little bit more flow. I found bubbles sometimes like more flow than I think, so we don't want it to get beat up, but since it's back there in the corner, it may need a little bit of flow just to help it along. Overall though, nice mix of corals, certainly more of a variety. A lot of times when it's a mixed reef, it's LPS and SPS. This has got plenty of softies in there as well. There's that lemon peel again. Really curious how that lemon peel behaves itself. In the tank, we've got a nice Monty cap, looks like here in the front, over crusting a rock. It's in a good place where it's not going to provide a lot of shade and cover other corals underneath it, so good placement on that as well. You know, this is a nice mixed reef type of tank, heavier on the softies, which is a nice change to see. I dig it. Lots of motion in this tank. Now, personally, one thing I'm looking at this that I would personally do is I would rearrange my aquascaping or add more rocks to build up the back a little bit. I like to see things that are more of a variety landscape. This aquascape's just a little bit flat for my taste. I mean, it's not wrong. It's just something that if I was doing this tank over, if I was doing it, I would build the scape up so it's a little more variety with a little more height to it is really what I'm looking at. Just a personal preference, something that I'm jumping out of me as I'm looking at this tank. But plenty of motion, nice things to look at. Okay, so he's got some zinnias. Understand that I'm not a zinnia fan, but this person clearly is. And looks like he's got a little bit of automation on there with a Senai. Keep an eye on things. That's certainly not going to hurt. We're going down to the sump now. Hey, nothing wrong with the Home Depot 5-gallon bucket for your auto top-off container. Been there, done that. In fact, that's what I'm using for top off on this holding tank. Nothing wrong with that. Jumping over to the, oh, hang on, I gotta notice this. He's even got the bottom of the container elevated off the ground. This may be to prevent any spills from stain underneath it. That's a good idea. It's something that I mean, he's got tile on this tank underneath it, which is nice because the water spills, it's not going to ruin the tile, but he elevated it maybe just to get any water that happens to spill to encourage it to evaporate. Now, one thing I'm seeing as I'm looking at this shot as well is he's got that surge protector there on the ground right next to the auto top off. I would get that thing off the ground because if you spill any water, it's going to land right on that thing, run to that thing is how it always pans out, then it's going to trip a breaker, and then you're going to have a problem. And of course, it always happens when you're not home. So mount that power strip somewhere, get it up off of the ground around that tank. I would highly recommend you doing that as soon as possible. Oh, look at this. Here's a smart thing. This guy has an air bubbler. This is probably a battery backup type of air bubbler sitting next to his sump. It looks like the tube is going down into the sump with an air stone. So two things I'm seeing about this. One, that's great. At the bare minimum, have some kind of battery-powered air bubbler on your tank ready to go. I'm constantly amazed at how many people have saltwater tanks, even freshwater tank people, and they don't have any kind of generator or any kind of backup. So if the power goes out, they're literally sitting there hoping that the power comes back before everything in their tank dies. Sure, we would all love to have a whole house generator. That might not be in the cards for us. Even your own little wheelie generator might not work. The bare minimum, put a battery-powered air bubbler like this guy has. Now, what I would do on this tank is I would take it and I would put that air stone up in the tank. He's got it in the sump. If the power goes out, the return pump's probably not running, so it's not going to get that oxygen, that air that you're pumping into the sump, up into the tank. So take that air stone. If it's not already in the tank, put it in the tank itself. You can tuck it up next to an overflow. Put it down lower in the tank is what I would do. Yeah, you're going to see an airline, but look, this is covering your tail in case something goes wrong. I would giving up a little bit of aesthetics to give myself that safety net just in case. It's not going to hurt. Nice move on having it. I would personally move it, assuming that it's down there in the sump. Looks like he's got a doser on the ground. Okay, besides the surge protector there on the ground, I would get that doser up off the ground as well. Any water happens to fall out of the sump or happens to splash down out of the tank, it's going to land right on that doser. I would also move that power strip up in the background there. I would get it up above the water line of the sump. This way any splashes or any water that happens to come down isn't going to fall down straight into that surge protector, that power brick, and cause problems. But look, he's got some nice stuff going on underneath the sump. Clearly it's a little packed in here, but we don't all have fish rooms where we can spread stuff out. But he's making the most of what he's got. A little bit of a refugium here. Looks like two different bulbs. Oh, that's a return line. That's a drain line. Okay, I get it. So a little bit of a display refugium there in the center. Those are fun to look at. And it's got the skimmer over here on the left. Nice move on keeping the skimmer away from the refugium. Refugiums grow algae. It's not uncommon for that algae to overtake things. I've seen skimmers that are sitting in the refugium when the algae will grow straight into the intake, or if a piece breaks off, then it gets sucked up into your skimmer. Then you got to clean the pump to clean out that needle wheel. So keeping the refugium separate from the skimmer, smart idea there. I would highly recommend that if you have your skimmer mixed in with your refugium. So a nice little compact type of setup. You got the sump underneath. A couple tweaks that I would see, but overall this is something nice to look at. It's got a little bit of automation. Make some tweaks, make that tank a little safer for you, especially get that air stone up in the tank if it isn't already. I like that you have that backup, but let's really make sure that that backup actually works for you in the case that you need it.